I think we can all relate to feelings of creative block and being uninspired. Name something worse than the blank page staring back at you and you don't know what to create at all. It can be quite overwhelming, and I often find myself, I end up just procrastinating on my art projects, or maybe I even lose interest in the usual techniques or subjects that I like to work on. Like if I'm staring at my journal and not even a floral motif is getting me excited to want to work in the journal, then I know I'm probably in a bit of a creative slump. And I've definitely been feeling this lately. Sometimes it's the perfectionism, or we have the dreaded comparison. Even just the fear of failure when you haven't created for a while can kind of snowball, and it feels like you're never going to pick up the collage papers or the paints again, or even just feeling burnt out. So this is me today going back to this paint sample journal that I was so excited to start. I've done a few videos, I'll drop the playlist link down below, and I was really excited to work in this journal and having a new format to work in. As you can see, it's like a skinny journal. The pages are not uniform at all. There's lots of texture going on and so many possibilities. And then I just set it aside and didn't end up coming back to it. So today I just decided to take that small step and show up to my journal and just start creating. And I thought I could give you just a few different tips and things that I find helpful when I'm feeling in a bit of a creative slump and I'm not sure what to create, or I just don't feel in the mood. Now obviously you can just do other hobbies, that is a thing, but if you are feeling like you want to create but maybe you've just got that blocker and you're not quite sure what to do, I think there are certain things that can help you to sort of move past that, and things that I have found helpful for myself. So I thought that I would share this with you. So I've made a bit of a list and we can go through these different ideas. So I'm not doing them all in today's video, but if you wanted to grab a pen and paper and maybe write down some ideas that you might like to use as a bit of a jumping off point almost. It's a way of approaching it a bit broader than prompts. It's literally just almost like a completely new approach sometimes to different things. So the first is to try a new technique or medium that you've never used before. So if you're feeling like you are totally uninspired by anything, then using something that you've never tried before can be a great way to get back into it and almost have that excitement of trying something new, so you can see how it integrates with what you already create, or maybe just create a swatch page. And this doesn't even have to be things that you've never used before, because you don't always have to go out and buy things. So think about maybe that pan of paints that you've got tucked away in the bottom of a drawer or something, or some papers in the back of a box that you haven't seen in a while, because that can kind of feel new. And maybe see how you can use some old supplies that you haven't touched in a while, and maybe just get them out and start swatching them, and just get the paintbrush moving, or get your collage papers moving. And I often find that this is really good because it's a bit like that snowball effect, that once you get started you might find yourself then wanting to explore different things. And don't worry about creating a masterpiece or what it actually looks like. The whole point is to just get into that process of creating and just allowing yourself to create without any pressure or framework, or having that idea of the end result in mind. So that can be a really great way to just experiment and play and try and break yourself free from the creative slump in that way. And in a similar way, you could also experiment with different colour palettes or themes. So if you're like me and you're a neutral girly, then maybe you might want to try and explore some brighter colours, maybe some pops of neon, or different shades of colours within your work, and just to push yourself and see, maybe having that novelty of a different way of working might inspire you. And even if it's something that you create and you think, wow, that's like really garish and I would never have that in my journal. It's just a way to get the ball rolling. And if you're really worried about putting something that is so different from your normal style within your journal, then you can definitely just work on separate pieces to your journal. So this could be literally just a piece of paper, or it could be like a tag, it could be an index card. And with like tags and index cards, that's a really good way as well, because you're working potentially a lot smaller than you are normally. And you could also do like a bit of a series. So if you had like 5 or 6 tags spread out, you could kind of work on multiple tags at once and not feel like that pressure of I've got to make like one perfect, amazing tag to put in my journal. You can kind of dot around between the different ones and create like different compositions. So one of them you might create just on the bottom of the tag with that color palette or that material. And then on the other tag, you might be working like just on the side, or you could think, what if I like rip the bottom off one of these tags? I think with these methods, it's all just about allowing yourself to indulge in that like what if of creating and not feeling so pressured by the constraints of making something perfect. So working with new materials or new colors, or even just like completely separate from your normal journal, can help to relieve that pressure, I think. And I find that creating something separate, I don't always want to then include it within my journal. Sometimes you might want to as a way of documenting the things that you have tried, but you can totally just like leave it out of your journal. You can repurpose it and maybe like upcycle it into something else at a later date. You can tuck it away as just a bit of inspiration, or you can even pop it in the recycling bin if you really don't like what you've created. But the whole point is to just show up and create something within your journal, or rather, just something that gets the creative juices flowing. So, different textures and materials can really help with this as well. So, thinking about using different papers, using different textures. So, I don't know, like stamping with bubble wrap, or different ways you can use like string. I'm trying to think of things that are, really low cost, especially like with junk journaling and the whole like recycled and upcycled papers. There's so many things that you can use that you don't need to go out and buy so many fancy things, and you can still experiment with texture. There's so many household objects that you can use to create texture, like corrugated cardboard and different pieces of packaging. You could even use them as the base that you want to work on. So when I was talking about, working on something separate to your journal, maybe you could literally just turn like a cereal cardboard box inside out, work on that, and then if you decide that you actually really do like it, then it's the perfect thing to perhaps turn into a journal cover, or just have as a different material for a tip in. So you could attach it then into the pages of your journal with a stapler or some washi tape and glue, and then still, include the things that you have created separately that just might add a little bit of extra something to your normal journal, different textures, things like that. I think as well, an important thing to do is to set ourselves some realistic goals. I am so guilty of thinking, right, I am going to sit down now. I haven't created anything for 2 weeks, say. I'm now going to sit down for 5 hours and I'm going to create like 20 different journal pages, and I'm going to do this, that, and the other. I'm going to try this, and I'm going to paint that, and I'm going to do all this fussy cutting, and I'm not then realistic. So when I actually like sit down to create, that doesn't happen, and that can almost be a bit more discouraging. So it's definitely important, I think, to set ourselves some realistic goals. So whether it's breaking down our larger projects into smaller and more manageable chunks. So if you are working on, maybe say you've got like a journal that you're making as a gift for somebody, for a friend, and you're feeling a little bit like creatively overwhelmed by everything to even get started with making that, Could you start by simply prepping some pages that you're going to bind into the journal? Could you start by even just like sketching out ideas of what you're going to do on the cover? Could you just think about the different binding methods and pick the one that you think will be perfect for it? Could you even just think about, what is the theme going to be? What colors am I going to use? And just gather the supplies. You don't even have to start creating it, but just breaking things down into these little steps, I think, is really helpful. And I've learnt this a lot from doing daily challenges like Junk Journal July and January, in having these like bite-sized things that I can do to either prepare or when I'm actually sitting down to create. So creating for like 15 minutes or 10 minutes, and just having those really small bite-sized things, so that maybe over the course of however long you actually build up to having a full spread, but you've not had to sit down and actually create the whole thing all in one go. I think it can really take the pressure off, and then each day you do then also have a bit of a new perspective on what you might want to do. So whether you think, oh, actually, I really don't like, what I did yesterday, let me do something else instead, you're still then taking those forward steps, even if you feel like you're not, because you might be covering something up. You're still layering and creating and moving forward within your journal. So, don't be discouraged even if you're only just making small steps, because they still are so important for the creative process as a whole. So I would definitely focus on the process of creating rather than the end result. And I know that's such a big like cliche, it's said all the time, but it is really important, to just focus on the process. So when I showed up to create in this journal, I had no idea what I actually wanted to do, and you'll see that I actually sort of moved around within the journal a little bit. So I did some fussy cutting of those absolutely gorgeous illustrations from a book that I got from a charity shop recently, in my last video, and I cut some of those out to use. I just really like the colours. I literally just flicked through and thought, which colours do I like that will go with the journal and the pages that I've got at the moment. So I cut those out. And then you'll see I do a bit of layering here. So I literally had some tags from things that I'd bought, or like scraps of paper. I really love that like mustard yellow that I've added, and I just played around with like where could I place it within the pages so that it would show through on the first page, and then have that layered effect. And that's something I really like when you have journal pages that are all different shapes and sizes, is you can really be creative with the different ways that you layer things up. So I was just letting myself do different things and explore those ideas, and not be too worried about the fact that I wasn't working on the original page that I sat down to work on, because I think overall for the journal I still made a lot of progress within what I was making. So I've put down here that, celebrate the small victories that you have along the way. So I think, building up some of those layers on the page means that when I open this journal, like I really love the colors and the textures that are starting to show through on the pages. And I just really love when there's so many like little small details and things built up, and it was really making me happy to look at and see all those different things, and making me then more excited to continue working within this journal. So I didn't actually create a full spread. Like I literally just added some imagery down, a bit of collage, stuck a random tag on there, and then also did some lettering with, this is one of my favorite brush pens to use. I get a lot of questions about this. So this is a Tombow Fudenosuke, I think it's pronounced, don't quote me on that. But it is a really nice brush pen to use, and you can just, do some like loose hand lettering with it. It's super forgiving. I'm not like a calligrapher expert or anything like that, but I just find that it gives a really nice effect for lettering. So definitely embrace the imperfection. There's no right or wrong way to create in our journals. I think that's something that we can sometimes get a bit caught up in is having our pages look a certain way, but the way we all create is so unique and so wonderful. So try to remember that when you're putting your pages together. And I think being in a phase of, a creative slump or a rut or whatever we want to call it, I think it's just all part of the process. And so today I, just showed up and did a little bit of random creating, if you want to call it that. But I was really pleased with the results, and it did make me more inspired to keep creating within this journal. And so, yeah, I hope you found some of these tips useful if maybe you're feeling in a little bit of a creative slump yourself. And I'd love to know in the comments your experiences of this, and if you have any tips for anybody of things that have worked for you. So hopefully we can inspire each other to keep creating and working through these creative slumps together. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.